You wake up in the morning, check your phone, go through your routine, talk to people, finish your work, and by the end of the day, you realize something strange. The day passed, but you didn't really feel it. It's like life is moving, but you're standing still inside it. Have you ever had that moment where everything looks fine from the outside? Job, responsibilities, maybe even success. But deep down, you feel like something important is missing. That quiet voice inside you asking, is this really the life I'm meant to live? Here's the surprising part. This feeling isn't new. 2,000 years ago, Roman emperors, philosophers, and warriors struggled with the exact same question. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, wrote in his private journal about anxiety, purpose, and the battle inside the human mind. Stoicism wasn't created for comfort. It was created for moments like these. Moments when life feels confusing, heavy, or out of control. And the Stoics believed something powerful. When you rebuild your mind, discipline your body, and strengthen your heart, you don't just survive life, you start mastering it. And if you're someone who wants more than quick motivation, if you're searching for clarity, discipline, and a deeper way to live, then consider subscribing. Not as a favor to me, but as a small commitment to yourself. Because sometimes the first step toward a stronger life is simply choosing to surround your mind with ideas that make you wiser, calmer, and harder to break. Part 1. The silent crisis of modern life. There is a strange moment that happens to many people, but almost nobody talks about it openly. It usually appears quietly in the middle of an ordinary day. Maybe you're driving home from work. Maybe you're scrolling through your phone late at night. Maybe you're sitting in a room full of people, but somehow feel completely alone. And suddenly a thought slips into your mind that you didn't invite. A simple but uncomfortable question: is this really my life? Not in a dramatic way, not like in a movie, just a quiet realization that something inside you feels disconnected from everything around you. You might still be functioning perfectly well. You wake up on time, you go to work, you handle responsibilities, you smile when people expect you to smile. From the outside, everything looks stable. Yet somewhere inside, a subtle emptiness starts growing. It's not always sadness. Sometimes it's just a dull feeling, like life has lost a bit of its color, like you're moving through your days on autopilot. And if you've ever felt that before, you should know something important. This experience isn't a personal failure. In fact, it's a deeply human one. Long before smartphones, social media, and endless notifications existed, people were already wrestling with the same inner struggle. Roman emperors, philosophers, soldiers, and scholars all faced it in their own way. One of the most powerful men who ever lived, Marcus Aurelius, wrote about this very battle in his private journal nearly 2,000 years ago. He ruled an empire, commanded armies, and held enormous authority. Yet in his writings he constantly reminded himself of something simple but profound. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That sentence captures something that modern life often makes us forget. Most people try to solve their problems by rearranging the outside world. They chase better jobs, more money, more recognition, more comfort. And there's nothing wrong with wanting improvement. But Stoic philosophy teaches that the real foundation of a meaningful life begins somewhere deeper. It begins inside the mind. Because no matter how much the world around you changes, the quality of your life will always depend on the way you think, interpret, and respond to what happens. This idea becomes even clearer when we look at modern psychology. Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, once said something striking: "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." In other words, many people believe life is happening to them, when in reality their own hidden beliefs and patterns are quietly shaping their experiences every day. Think about that for a moment. How many decisions do you make automatically? How many habits guide your actions without you even noticing? The way you react to criticism, the way you handle stress, the way you talk to yourself when something goes wrong. These patterns slowly build the structure of your life. And if those patterns remain unconscious, you end up living a life that feels strangely out of your control. This is where Stoicism becomes powerful. Stoicism doesn't promise that life will become easy. In fact, it assumes the opposite. The Stoics understood that life is unpredictable, often difficult and sometimes unfair. But instead of trying to control everything outside themselves, they focused on strengthening the one thing they could truly master, their inner world. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, expressed this idea clearly when he said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That statement might sound simple, but it holds enormous power. Because once you truly accept it, your attention shifts away from blaming circumstances and toward building inner strength. Imagine two people facing the same challenge. Both lose a job unexpectedly. One person collapses into bitterness and self-doubt. The other sees the situation as an opportunity to rethink their direction and grow stronger. The external event is identical, yet the outcome becomes completely different because of the way each person responds internally. This is the heart of Stoicism. Not coldness, not emotional suppression, but a disciplined and thoughtful relationship with your own mind. And yet, in today's world, the mind is constantly under attack. Every day we are exposed to thousands of messages competing for our attention. Notifications buzz, headlines scream for outrage. Social media invites endless comparison. The result is a mind that rarely experiences silence, rarely experiences clarity, rarely experiences true reflection. Instead, many people move through life reacting to whatever stimulus appears next. A notification appears, and they check it. Someone posts an opinion online, and they react emotionally. A stranger's success appears on their screen, and they compare their own life to it. Slowly, almost invisibly, their mental environment becomes chaotic. Marcus Aurelius warned about this type of mental chaos long before the internet existed. In one of his reflections, he wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." What he meant was simple. The quality of your inner life will always reflect the thoughts you allow to occupy your mind. If your thoughts are constantly filled with comparison, resentment, or fear, your life will begin to feel heavy. But if your thoughts become disciplined, intentional, and grounded in reason, your entire experience of life begins to change. This realization is where transformation begins, not with dramatic events, not with sudden inspiration, but with small moments of awareness, moments when you step back and observe your own thinking, moments when you ask yourself whether your current patterns are actually helping you live the kind of life you want. Modern psychology supports this idea strongly. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, once wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response." That space is where freedom exists, and the Stoics dedicated their lives to expanding that space. Because when you develop awareness of your thoughts, you stop being controlled by them. You begin to guide them instead. At first, this process can feel uncomfortable. When people start paying attention to their inner world, they often discover beliefs they didn't realize they were carrying. Old fears, hidden doubts, narratives about themselves that quietly limit their potential. But recognizing these patterns is not a sign of weakness. It is the beginning of self-knowledge. Carl Jung believed that personal growth requires confronting the parts of ourselves we would rather ignore. He wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In other words, True development happens when we become honest about our own inner struggles. Stoicism encourages this same honesty. It asks you to examine your reactions, your desires, and your fears, not with judgment, but with curiosity and discipline. Because once you understand the patterns shaping your life, you gain the ability to reshape them. And that is where the journey truly begins. Most people spend their lives trying to change their circumstances before they change themselves. They believe that if they just reach the next milestone, the next promotion, the next relationship, the next achievement, everything inside will finally feel settled. But the Stoics understood something different. Inner stability must come first. Seneca once wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That sentence reveals the true goal of Stoic practice: not control over others, not domination over circumstances, but mastery of one's own mind. And when that mastery begins to develop, something remarkable happens. Situations that once felt overwhelming start to feel manageable. Problems that once caused panic become challenges that can be approached with calm reasoning. Life itself does not necessarily become easier, but you become stronger, and strength changes everything. Because when your mind becomes disciplined, your body begins to follow. Your actions become more intentional, your habits become more aligned with your values, your relationships become more thoughtful and authentic. Eventually, something even deeper begins to shift. Your heart changes, not in a sentimental way, but in a powerful one. You begin to feel less controlled by anger, resentment, and fear. You develop patience, perspective, compassion. This is why Stoic philosophy often describes human development as a kind of alignment between three elements: the mind, the body, and the heart. The mind provides clarity, the body provides strength, the heart provides meaning. When these three parts of life begin working together, something extraordinary happens. You stop drifting through life unconsciously. You start living deliberately. And that is what this journey is really about. Not becoming perfect and not eliminating every problem, but building a life guided by awareness, discipline, and purpose. Part 2. Fix the mind, reclaiming the control you forgot you had. Most people don't realize it, but their mind is constantly being trained. The problem is that they are not the ones doing the training. Their environment is. Every notification, every headline, every comparison on social media, every stressful conversation at work, all of these things quietly shape the way a person thinks. Day after day, these small influences build mental habits that become automatic. And once those habits are automatic, they begin directing your life without asking for permission. Think about the first thing many people do when they wake up. Before their feet even touch the ground, their hand reaches for the phone. Messages, news, notifications, maybe a quick scroll through social media. In less than 5 minutes, their mind is already filled with other people's opinions, other people's lives, and other people's problems. The day hasn't even started yet, but their attention is already scattered in 10 different directions. The Stoics would have considered this extremely dangerous, not because information itself is bad, but because an undisciplined mind quickly becomes a restless mind, and a restless mind cannot think clearly. Marcus Aurelius understood this very well. In his private reflections, he reminded himself repeatedly that the greatest battle a person fights is not outside in the world, but inside their own thoughts. He wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." That sentence sounds simple, but it contains a powerful warning. If the quality of your thoughts is poor, your experience of life will also become poor. If your thoughts are constantly filled with anxiety, jealousy, resentment, or fear, those emotions will quietly shape the way you see everything around you. The world itself may not have changed, but your perception of it will feel heavier and darker. Modern psychology agrees with this observation. Cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the most widely used psychological treatments today, is built on a similar principle. The way we think influences the way we feel and act. Change the pattern of thinking, and the emotional experience begins to change as well. Carl Jung approached this idea from another angle. He once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." In other words, many people stay busy not because their lives require it, but because silence forces them to confront the chaos inside their own minds. Stoicism teaches the opposite approach. Instead of avoiding your inner world, you examine it. You observe your thoughts the same way a scientist observes an experiment. Not with panic, not with judgment, just with awareness. Imagine sitting quietly for a moment and watching your thoughts pass by. At first it might feel strange. Thoughts appear quickly, one after another. A memory from yesterday, a worry about tomorrow, a random idea that has nothing to do with the present moment. Most people assume they must follow every thought wherever it leads, but Stoic training begins with a simple realization. A thought appearing in your mind does not mean you must accept it. Epictetus taught this clearly when he said, "Do not say of anything, 'I have lost it,' but rather, 'I have returned it.'" His point was that many of our emotional reactions come from the assumptions we attach to events. If something happens and we immediately interpret it as disaster, our mind becomes overwhelmed. But if we pause and question that interpretation, the emotional storm often weakens. This pause is one of the most important skills a person can develop. Viktor Frankl described it beautifully when he wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response." The Stoics spent their lives expanding that space. They trained themselves to slow down the automatic reactions that normally control people's behavior. At first, this might sound difficult, but the training can begin with extremely small steps. One of the most powerful Stoic practices is something Marcus Aurelius did every morning. Before the day even began, he reminded himself of the challenges he might face. He wrote that he would encounter people who were selfish, impatient, or rude. Instead of becoming angry when these things happened, he prepared his mind ahead of time. By expecting difficulty, he removed its power to surprise him. This practice is sometimes called negative visualization. It doesn't mean expecting the worst in a pessimistic way. It means understanding that life contains obstacles and preparing your mind to handle them calmly. If you walk into your day expecting perfection, even small problems can feel overwhelming. But if you walk into your day prepared for challenges, your mind remains steady when they appear. Seneca explained this idea when he wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Many of the things that cause people stress never actually happen. The mind creates worst-case scenarios, repeats them endlessly, and reacts emotionally as if they were already real. Stoic training teaches you to notice this pattern. When your mind begins racing toward anxiety, you pause and ask a simple question. Is this thought actually helping me right now? If the answer is no, you gently redirect your attention to something more useful. Over time, this small habit becomes powerful. You begin noticing how many thoughts are unnecessary, how many worries are exaggerated, how many emotional reactions come from interpretations rather than facts. Carl Jung once wrote, "Thinking is difficult, that's why most people judge." His observation highlights something important about the human mind. Quick reactions are easy. Careful thinking requires effort. But the Stoics believed that effort is exactly what leads to freedom, because when you train your mind to think clearly, you become less controlled by external circumstances. Imagine two people stuck in traffic. One person becomes furious, pounding the steering wheel and feeling their stress rise with every passing minute. The other person accepts the situation calmly, understanding that anger will not make the cars move any faster. The external event is identical, but the internal experience is completely different. This difference comes from mental discipline, and mental discipline grows through practice. One practical way to begin training your mind is through journaling. Marcus Aurelius wrote his famous Meditations not for publication, but as a personal exercise. Every day he wrote reminders to himself about how to think, how to behave, and how to stay grounded in reason. Writing forces the mind to slow down. When thoughts remain inside your head, they often feel chaotic and overwhelming. But when you write them down, they become clearer. You can examine them, question them, improve them. Many modern psychologists encourage journaling for the same reason. It creates distance between you and your thoughts. Instead of being trapped inside them, you can observe them from the outside. Another powerful Stoic habit is controlling the information you allow into your mind. Just as the body becomes unhealthy when it consumes poor food, the mind becomes unhealthy when it consumes poor information. Marcus Aurelius warned himself about this constantly. He reminded himself not to waste time worrying about what other people were doing or saying. His focus was on controlling his own actions and thoughts. In today's world, this lesson is more relevant than ever. Social media makes it easy to compare your life to thousands of other people every day. But comparison rarely produces clarity. More often, it produces insecurity. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once said, "Comparison is the end of happiness and the beginning of discontent." When you constantly measure your life against someone else's highlight reel, your own progress begins to feel invisible. Stoicism invites you to step away from that trap. Instead of asking whether you are doing better than others, you ask a more meaningful question. Am I improving compared to the person I was yesterday? This shift in perspective changes everything. Progress becomes personal instead of competitive. And when progress becomes personal, motivation becomes sustainable. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The mind becomes quieter, not empty, but clearer. You notice your thoughts more easily. You react less impulsively. Situations that once triggered frustration begin to feel manageable. Part 3. Fix the body. Discipline that builds strength. There is a strange disconnect in modern life. Many people spend hours trying to improve their mindset, watching motivational videos, reading about success, learning new ideas about productivity and personal growth. But at the same time, their body is exhausted, sluggish, and neglected. They sleep too little. They move too little. They eat without thinking. Then they wonder why their mind feels foggy, anxious, or unmotivated. The Stoics understood something simple that many people today forget. The mind and the body are not separate machines. They are deeply connected. When one becomes weak, the other struggles as well. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of this truth almost every morning. When he felt resistance to getting out of bed, he wrote a powerful reminder to himself. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, "I have to go to work," as a human being. His point was not about work in the modern corporate sense. He meant something deeper. Human beings are meant to act, move, create, and contribute. A life of constant comfort slowly weakens the spirit. In modern psychology, we see the same principle repeated again and again. Physical movement improves mood, reduces anxiety, and strengthens mental resilience. The body influences the brain in ways that many people underestimate. William James, one of the founders of modern psychology, once said something very interesting. Action may not always bring happiness, but there is no happiness without action. That idea aligns perfectly with Stoic philosophy. The Stoics believed that waiting to feel motivated before taking action is a mistake. Instead, action itself creates momentum. think about how many times people say things like, "I'll start exercising when I feel motivated." But motivation is unreliable. Some days it appears, many days it doesn't. If you rely on motivation alone, progress becomes inconsistent. Stoicism replaces motivation with discipline. Discipline is quieter than motivation. It doesn't depend on emotion, it depends on commitment. You act not because you feel excited, but because you know the action aligns with the person you want to become. This is why the Stoics valued physical training, not because they were obsessed with appearance, but because physical discipline strengthens character. When you push your body through difficulty, your mind learns that discomfort is not something to fear. Seneca once wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." That sentence captures the relationship between effort and growth. Without resistance, muscles cannot grow stronger. The same principle applies to character. Modern life, however, often removes resistance from everyday experience. Food arrives instantly. Entertainment is endless. Comfort is always available. While these conveniences make life easier, they also reduce the opportunities for discipline. Over time, a life built entirely around comfort can weaken a person's ability to handle stress. The Stoics approached life differently. They believed that occasionally choosing discomfort on purpose was an important form of training. Seneca practiced this regularly. Sometimes he would sleep on the floor or eat simple meals, even though he was wealthy and could afford luxury. He did this to remind himself that comfort was not necessary for happiness. By voluntarily experiencing small hardships, he strengthened his ability to face real challenges calmly. This idea might sound extreme at first, but the principle behind it is surprisingly practical. Consider something simple, like a cold shower. The moment the cold water hits your skin, your body reacts immediately. Every instinct tells you to step away. But if you stay calm and breathe through the discomfort, something interesting happens. After a short moment, your mind adapts. The initial shock fades. This small experience teaches a powerful lesson. Discomfort is often temporary. The mind can handle more than it initially believes. Psychologist Angela Duckworth, who studied perseverance and long-term success, described a similar concept when she introduced the idea of grit. She explained that success is often less about talent and more about the ability to persist through difficulty. The Stoics understood grit long before modern psychology gave it a name. But discipline of the body does not only involve pushing through discomfort, it also involves respect for your physical well-being. Sleep, for example, is one of the most underestimated aspects of personal development. Many people sacrifice sleep in order to work more, watch more, or scroll longer through their phones. At first it might seem harmless, but over time, lack of sleep weakens concentration, mood, and emotional stability. Seneca warned about wasting time, but he also understood the importance of restoration. A tired mind becomes impulsive and reactive. A rested mind becomes thoughtful and steady. Modern neuroscience confirms this. During sleep, the brain processes memories, repairs itself, and restores emotional balance. Without adequate rest, even small problems begin to feel overwhelming. This is why taking care of your body is not selfish, it is foundational. The same principle applies to nutrition. What you eat directly affects your energy, focus, and emotional stability. The Stoics encouraged moderation rather than excess. They believed that simple, balanced living created more freedom than constant indulgence. Epictetus expressed this idea when he said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." When your happiness depends on endless consumption, you become trapped in a cycle of craving. But when your needs become simpler, life becomes lighter. Many people today feel overwhelmed because their lifestyle constantly drains their energy. Poor sleep, poor nutrition, and constant distraction slowly wear down both body and mind. Rebuilding the body begins with awareness. Ask yourself a few honest questions. How much sleep do you usually get? How often do you move your body during the day? What kinds of food give you energy, and which ones leave you feeling sluggish? These questions are not about guilt, they are about clarity. Carl Jung once observed, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." That idea is deeply empowering. Your past habits do not permanently define you. Every day offers new choices. If your current lifestyle feels out of balance, you can begin adjusting it one small step at a time. Start with movement. It doesn't have to be complicated. A daily walk, a short workout, stretching in the morning. The goal is consistency, not perfection. Then focus on sleep. Try to create a simple evening routine that allows your mind to slow down before bed. Reduce screens. Give your brain time to transition from activity to rest. Then pay attention to food. Notice how different meals affect your energy. Small improvements repeated daily often produce dramatic long-term changes. Over time, these habits build something powerful: physical resilience. Resilience means your body can handle stress without collapsing into exhaustion. It means your energy remains steady even during challenging days. When your body becomes resilient, your mind benefits as well. Focus improves. Emotional reactions become calmer. Difficult tasks feel more manageable. This connection between physical strength and mental clarity has been observed by philosophers, psychologists, and leaders across history. This is why many breakthroughs in life happen during simple physical moments: a walk outside, a workout session, a quiet run. When the body moves, the mind often finds clarity. But even with a strong mind and a disciplined body, something essential can still be missing. A person can be intelligent, productive, and physically capable, yet still feel empty inside. That emptiness often comes from a deeper place: the heart, not the physical organ, but the emotional and moral center of a person's life. The Stoics believed that true strength requires more than discipline. It also requires compassion, purpose, and connection. Because without those elements, life becomes efficient but meaningless. And that brings us to the third Stoic rule, the one that transforms strength into wisdom. Before you go, remember this: your life does not change in one dramatic moment. It changes in the quiet decisions you make when no one is watching, the moment you choose discipline over distraction, growth over comfort, awareness over autopilot. As Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The challenges you face are not here to stop you. They are here to shape you into someone stronger, wiser, and more awake. If this message spoke to you, don't let it end here. One idea can spark a change, but consistent reflection builds transformation. So take the next step on your Stoic journey and watch one of the videos appearing on your screen right now. It will deepen what we started today and help you continue strengthening your mind, your discipline, and your purpose. And truly thank you for being here and for being part of Psychresto Mind. Your time, your attention, and your willingness to grow mean more than you realize. Until next time, keep building a mind that cannot be shaken.